kind of a bummer because he's had this week on vacation, and this was actually planned for me to take this message. Actually, it's kind of a bummer because I was kind of hoping he could be here, but then he got sick the last few days, anyways. But probably a good week. But anyways, it's never a good week to be sick, so excuse me. But still, I mean, I'm glad he didn't feel the pressure of today. So there is no Converge tonight. The other thing is, when it comes to Financial Peace University, my wife and I have been through it twice. And it is wonderful. And we're going through it again. We're actually going through this one. And this time we're bringing our kids. Because we haven't had, it was one of those things. It's like, gosh, did we ever teach our kids about finances? And once you've signed up and once you've done it, it never costs you that amount ever again. And the other thing is, you get this really cool budget app for your phone. I mean, and it connects to things, and you can watch things, and I'm all about apps and technology, as you know. But trust me, Financial Peace University, when it comes to his principles of getting out of debt and prioritizing money and not going to bad habits and dealing with your money, this guy's brilliant. And so I encourage anybody that just, maybe you're a veteran with money, and you just want to pick up on a couple of things. That's okay. Like I said, this is my third time through it. I've been through Larry Burkett's and I've been through Ron Blue's. So you can almost say this is my fifth time. Maybe I just need it. Okay? Probably do. But it's good every single time. And there's been years I have been the total geek when it comes to putting my budget together. And he'll talk to you in the videos between the geeks, the nerds, and the not nerds. And I'm the nerd in the family. I mean, let's just put it this way. I created our budget to follow his plan one year. I had one tab for all the summations and everything, and I programmed every tab for every single month to do all this. Anyhow, never mind. All right. So I was proud of it. Well, anyways, first of all, I want to thank Pastor Rick. Pastor Rick is an amazing pastor, as you know, and you know I believe that. I almost wanted to stand up here today and say, well, when the cat's away, the mice will play, but then I realized, no, wait a minute, though. I respect Pastor Rick. I actually submit myself to his pastoral authority, and I know it's healthy authority, and as we get into today's topic, we'll see some unhealthy things, but I submit myself to his authority, and us on the board, yeah, we keep them in check so that authority doesn't get abusive. Of course, we don't really need to with Pastor Rick, but we're there for that, to protect the church and to protect Pastor. But I'm very grateful for the pastor that we have. Can somebody say amen? Amen. I'd like to start off with a video, but as he prepares that video, we're in this series called Love and Sex Hijacked. And Pastor Rick has discussed several things, everywhere from what love really is, and I love that word, yada. I've never heard it explained that way ever before. And I've heard the Greek terms for love and all this kind of stuff. But yada, I mean, I knew Seinfeld, but I didn't know that. And if you're young, you probably don't know Seinfeld. But all of us that are between 40 and 50 really know Seinfeld, and maybe some older, 60. But Seinfeld was funny, and they'd always say yada, 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 you know? And this happened, yada, 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 and it's such the opposite of what the word really means. And then as Pastor Rick got into the message on sex, it was probably one of the best ones I've ever heard. Literally. Sex is sacred. And we forget about the sacredness of it. But today I want to talk to you about abuse. I've entitled it Love Stolen. Because we walk through life, we walk in this broken world. Let me know when you're ready with the video. Are you ready with the video? We walk in this broken world where abuse is everywhere. So I want to start out with this little clip.
There's a character in the story that hates goodness and beauty. embraces the beauty of God. So we can see that virtually in all our stories of how we came to our sexuality, how abuse came into our lives, there's somebody there who is scattering and bringing accusation in order to ruin.
So I'm in 5th grade in Upland, California. It's an idyllic area. Everything's great. But there's this tough kid in my 5th grade class, and he beats up people. He doesn't beat me up because I'm funny. But one day he says, Lynch, I want to meet down at the railroad tracks. And there was a place down at the end where all of us kids went. It had a rail car where oranges were piled in there, and then they were sent out all across the country, and we would just go in there and eat oranges. It was Saturday though, and nobody was there except us. And I got into the rail car, and then he followed me in, and he gave me that look that said, this will all be different now. And he told me the things that he would do to me to violate me, and the things that I would do to him. And I don't know if I was scared, I don't know if I was intimidated or overwhelmed, but I did it. And my first thought was, no one must ever know.
If you want to see the rest of the movie, you'll have to go on the road and return, just to let you know. Abuse is a very serious topic. I guess if Pastor Rick said last week was PG-13, this week is a heavier PG-13. Can I say that? How many, and you don't have to raise your hand, but I'm just going to ask this question. I would say all of us are affected by abuse. And if you're not, you might want to raise your hand. How's that? But we've all been affected by abuse in our society. It's pervading our society. It is plaguing our society. Our culture, if you haven't noticed, is disintegrating. And abuse is on the very forefront of it. And yet, it's been here really forever. Probably one of my favorite stories. Well, I mean, you could go all the way back to Seth and Cain, when Cain killed his brother Seth. I mean, that's abuse. One of my favorite Old Testament stories, if not probably one of my favorite stories in the whole Bible, is the story of Joseph. And I'd like to read it to you, and I do have some reading today. But I want you to put your ears on, like, this is a story, and I want you to imagine going back to this time. This is taken out of Genesis chapter 37. And it says, now Israel, meaning Jacob, loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age. And he had made an ornate robe for him. And when his brothers saw their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. I pause there just for a minute to say this favoritism is a form of abuse. It abuses the favored child as it does the rest of them. And we see this play out. I read this story. Let's finish this one. And Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, listen to the dream I had. You were binding sheaves of grain in the field, and suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, and your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. His brothers said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of the dream he had and what he said. Then he had another dream, and he told his brothers, listen, he said, I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing to me. And when he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow to the ground before you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in his mind. when Joseph, his brothers had gone out to graze his father's flocks near Shechem. And Israel now said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing in the flocks near Shechem. Come, and I will send you to them." "Very well," he replied. And so he said to him, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers in the flocks, and bring the word back to me." And then he sent him off to the valley of Hebron. And when Joseph arrived in Shechem, he found a man wandering around the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" And he replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks?" "They have moved on from here," the man said. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" And so Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But when they saw him in a distance, before they reached him, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes that dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him, and we will see what comes of his dreams." When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed blood. Just throw him in the cistern here in the wilderness, and don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and to take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him in the cistern. The cistern was empty, and there was no water in it. And they sat down and ate a meal. And then they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming to Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, myrrh, and they were on their way to take them to Egypt. And if you don't know the story, it's at this point his brothers sell him to this caravan. Reuben wasn't with them. Reuben later comes back, tears his clothes, says, "What have you done?" And Joseph's been sold into slavery. This is abuse. All of us can probably say we've suffered abuse at some level or another, especially after you hear how it is defined. And sad to say, some of us probably even have been abusive to some level or another. But this is outright abuse. And it was very hurtful. It was very damaging. I can't imagine suffering this kind of abuse. It basically was slave trade. Let me define for you what abuse is. Abuse is the improper usage or treatment of an entity, often to unfairly or improperly gain benefit. We see this all over. We see it from one extreme to the next in today's society. We see a movement because ladies have been suppressed for so long, saying, "Hey, this is wrong." And there's nothing wrong with stepping out and saying, "Hey, this is wrong." But then we see the other extreme where people will use political initiatives to falsely accuse people. And we've got both extremes abusing everyone, and everyone scratching their head going, "What's going on?" It's the improper usage or treatment of an entity. Abuse can come in many forms: in a physical or verbal maltreatment, injury, assault, violation, rape, unjust practices, crimes, and other types of aggression. To these descriptions, one can also add the notion of the wrongness of using another human being as a means to an ends rather than an ends to themselves. There's all forms of abuse. I'm going to read a few. I put less up here because, as you can tell, there's a lot of words, and I apologize for a lot of words. I told Pastor Rick, I said, "Rick, I almost feel clinical this morning." But to be honest with you, it's a subject that's actually very dear to me. There's abuse of authority. There's abuse of discretion, abuse of dominance, abuse of indulgences, abuse of information, abuse of power, abuse of process, abuse of rank, statistics of the system, abuse of trust, abuse of supervision, academic abuse, adolescent abuse, adult abuse, alcohol abuse, animal abuse, antisocial behavior, bullying, character assassination, child abuse, parental abuse of children, child sexual abuse, child-on-child sexual abuse, church abuse, civil rights abuse, clerical abuse, cyber abuse or cyberbullying, dating abuse, defamation, disability abuse, discriminatory abuse, abuse of authority, and abuse of dominance. There's neglect, narcissistic abuse. There's online abuse. There's police abuse. There's political abuse. There's prejudice. There's rape. There's sexual abuse. There's self-abuse. Don't stop with spiritual abuse. I think I had some of them duplicated in there. Just trying to scan. A few that I really want to make note of this morning. And the first one being spiritual abuse. Especially in light of what's just kind of come out in the Baptist sector. We've seen this in the Catholic Church. We've seen this now in the Baptist Church. But let me tell you, it's a church problem. Why is it a church problem? Demons. I'm going to tell you what, yeah. I'm going to chuckle out of it, yeah. Demons, our flesh, the world, society. We all have our demons that we struggle with. But guess what? The church isn't a perfect place. The church is the place where you're supposed to go and get whole. This place is supposed to be filled with people struggling that are meeting Jesus and getting healing. It's supposed to be a safe place. It's supposed to be the place that says, hey, I've got a place I can come to and say, I've been abused. I've been hurt. I've been raped. I've been neglected. I've been abused. And the church is supposed to be the safe place that says, yes, I want to take you in and I want to help. And it's okay. There's no shame here. Are you hearing me this morning? Yeah. How else would Satan want to thwart God's plan? Yeah, it's demonic. Satan has a plan to destroy the work of God in this earth. Satan has a plan to nullify the message of God. And if he can get us fighting, and if he can get us discredited, and he can get us wounded, and if he can lay us bare and just basically destroy us, he's won. The church is supposed to be the safe place. That's why Pastor Rick and I say this all the time. Doesn't matter what a person's come from. If you've committed adultery, if you're struggling with alcohol, if you're struggling with drugs, if you're struggling with pornography, it doesn't matter. This is the place. And is it easy? I really wish every person hurting, myself included, could come through the doors and say, Pastor Rick, will you pray for me and make it all go away? Rick has a saying, and I've adopted it, so I'm going to steal it. It's mine now, okay? I freely share what I've rightfully stolen. I've said that ever since I've been here, I think. But God will never waste a hurt. Are you hearing me? God will never waste a hurt. I don't believe it's ever God's plan that we hurt. I don't believe it's ever God's intention that we suffer or have heartache. But I know that God will never waste a hurt. Well, how do I know that? Therefore, there is no condemnation for them who are in Christ Jesus. But it also says he will work all things out for our good. It doesn't say he planned it. He said it doesn't say that everything that happens to us is good. It says he will use and work out everything that has happened to us for good. God never wastes a hurt. Spiritual abuse is so subtle. It's so damaging because it's always done in the name of God. And it distorts a person's view of God. Spiritual abuse includes psychological abuse, emotional abuse. It can also include physical abuse and sexual abuse. Here are a few signs of it. If a church has a distorted view of respect, respect me no matter what. blood, sweat, and tears for me to live this as anyone else. My grandmother used to say this. I love this saying. You're no better than anybody else. You're no worse either. Are you hearing me? You're no worse either. You're just no better. Can somebody say amen? Do you hear the truth that's in that saying? Because so often when we hear, well, I know I'm no better. I'm just a... No. You're no worse either. You're the righteousness of God in Christ. You're a child of God. When Jesus lives on the inside of your heart, you're his child and he loves you. Hang on a second. Before you're a child, he loves you so much he sent his son to die for you. He loves you. Are you hearing me this morning? But as a pastor and a leader, leadership cannot have a distorted view of respect. Demands allegiance as proof of a follower's allegiance to Christ. Uses exclusive language like we're the only ones that have this right. To create a culture of fear and shame. Often has a charismatic leader at the helm who starts off well but slips into arrogance, protectionism, and pride. Cultivates a dependence on one leader or leaders for spiritual information. I'm here to tell you, you can actually receive from God yourself. Can somebody say amen? You can actually read the Bible and God can talk to you. Okay? You don't have to have me. You don't have to have Pastor Rick. God speaks. Demands blind servitude of their followers, but lives in prestigious, privileged lives. Buffers themselves from criticism by placing people around them whose only allegiance is to the leader. To hold an outward performance but rejects authentic spirituality and uses exclusivity for allegiance. It's spiritual abuse. It's damaging. I've seen churches that when somebody leaves the church to go to another one, there's something wrong with them. How you following me this morning? I would love to think I have the corner on doctrine and theology. I would just love to think that, but I don't. I'm a preacher's kid. I was raised in a Christian school. I went to Bible school. I studied it for the fun of it. I listened to the Bible every year all the way through, and I have for like 8 years now. It's a hobby, okay? But guess what? I have found this, that I think I'm starting to scratch the surface. I've learned a little more this year of how much I don't know. And that God is so infinite. If I could figure him out, he couldn't be God. You may have been a victim of spiritual abuse at some point. You may have seen victims of spiritual abuse. Abuse will rob you of your love. You can't give what you don't have. Pastor Rick talked about this last week. It was a wonderful statement. I love that statement. It hit me between the eyes. I don't know if it did you, but you can't give what you don't have. Why else would Satan want to steal love out of your heart and make sure that you got abused? To make sure you don't have anything to give. This world is crying out for love. This world is crying out for answers. And Satan's whole goal is to rob everything that you have to offer. And if he can, he'll use the church to do it. Another form of abuse, and I'm just going to discuss a few of them. Passive aggressiveness. In psychology, passive-aggressive behavior is characterized by a habitual pattern of non-active resistance to expected work requirements, opposition, sullenness, stubbornness, and negative attitudes in response to requirements for normal performance levels expected by others. Most frequently, it occurs in the workplace, where resistance is exhibited by indirect behaviors as procrastination, forgetfulness, and purposeful inefficiency. But it also can be in our marriages and in our homes and whatnot. Manipulation. I want to discuss manipulation because it's almost hard to get away from it anywhere. Manipulation is almost everywhere. In fact, the first thing about manipulation, the first description of it is lying. Anybody been the subject of a liar before? Lying is manipulation. All forms of abuse are extremely selfish. And we've been at the hands of abuse. And if you've ever told a lie, anybody tell a lie? Anybody not tell a lie? Wait a minute, who's lying? You've probably been abusive. There's lying by commission, when somebody just lies flat out. I was working with and I still work with this company in England. And the former CEO of this company, we had no clue was this big liar. And he was basically Bernie Madoff on steroids. And he had taken so much investment money from people and almost devastated the whole company and everything. And we've got one guy trying to rescue it. He was lying to get money. He was lying to everybody what his plans were and making promises there was no way he could keep. And this is the CEO. He was just a habitual liar. He really, I honestly believe he believed his lies. And then there's lying by omission. It's a very subtle form of lying, withholding a significant amount of truth or withholding truth in order to manipulate something. There's denial. There's a form of manipulation where you just deny, well, I don't know, not me. Rationalization, minimization, selective inattention or selective attention. Diversion, where you just kind of divert, and somebody ever asks you something, no, it's this, and you just kind of divert things. Covert intimidation, guilt tripping. Somebody look at their neighbor and say, oh, me. Guilt tripping. We've taught our daughter and our son exactly what guilt tripping is. We've modeled it quite well. I'm really glad they listened to us because now my daughter will look at me and go, Dad, are you guilt tripping me? I don't mean to. Guilt trip, in its worst form, really is a special kind of intimidation tactic. A manipulator suggests to the conscientiousness or the consciousness of the victim that they do not care enough, or they're too selfish, or they have it too easy, and this usually results in the victim feeling bad, keeping themselves in a self-doubting, anxious, or submissive position. Shaming is manipulation. To put someone down and increase fear and self-doubt in the victim. Vilifying the victim. More than any other, this tactic is a powerful means of putting the victim on the defensive while simultaneously making the aggressive intent of the manipulator, while the manipulator falsely accuses the victim as being an abuser in response when the victim stands up for or defends himself. That one's complex. It's practically gaslighting. Does anybody know what gaslighting is? Where you've so twisted things, the manipulator has made the victim feel like they're the villain. Why am I talking about this stuff today? Because I think the church is way too silent on this. One. Two, I think we've all been hurt by it. And we need Jesus. And as you're going to see at the end, there is a path to healing. There is. It's not an easy path to healing. But if you've been a victim of abuse, and if you're carrying wounds, if your love has been stolen, God has a way out. And let me tell you this, one person's abuse may not be another person's abuse. There are some people, when you talk about somebody bullying somebody, they just brush it off. Yeah, well, To you too. And they go on their merry way and they don't think anything of it. To another person, the same bullying could have wounded them and hurt them for years, if not the rest of their life, until they face it. And nobody can judge another person's abuse as to the severity or how it impacted their life. No one can. Manipulation, there's playing the servant role, there's seduction, there's projecting the blame, there's feigning innocence, there's feigning confusion. Oh, I don't know, I didn't realize, blah, blah, blah. There's anger. What does abuse look like? How do you know? What are the signs? For physical abuse, most of the time it's easy. We look for bruises, scrapes, marks. Unless it's just a threat. Do you know that physical threat is physical abuse? It's also emotional abuse. Somebody's threatening you physically. There's sexual abuse, which isn't really as easy as you think. And the reason why is this. When it comes to sexual abuse, we all know what the worst case is. Okay? I don't think I need to explain, or else this becomes rated R in here really quick. But the problem is that the definition of sexual abuse is basically any kind of forced behavior on another person in any sexual way that was unwanted or unwelcomed, and what they were resistance to. That is sexual abuse. That happens between siblings. That happens from parents. That happens from uncles. That happens from trusted people. That happens from police. That happens from pastors. That happens from a lot of people you would never expect. We've seen it in our politics. We've seen it in our celebrities. It happens even from friends. And sometimes the temptation is, yeah, but was that what I thought it was? No, nah. And we don't understand the effect it has sometimes. Is it found in the Bible? Oh yeah, it's found in the Bible. In 2 Samuel 13, here's another really good story. I'm just going to say it because I'm running way out of time. I'm going to run way over. But you got Tamar and Amnon. What's that? Is that okay? Are you guys good? You guys are bored, aren't you?
Preach it, brother.
So I don't run into the next service. I'll try to move things on at least a little bit quick. You got Tamar and Amnon. Amnon is Absalom's brother, which is both are David's sons. Tamar is David's daughter. Amnon's from a different mother than Tamar. And if I read the story to you, the story goes just like this. Amnon's talking to his buddy and telling him how much he's in love with Tamar, his half-sister, in lust with his half-sister. And they devised this plot. He said, why don't you go in and pretend you're sick? And while you're laying there in bed, call for your sister and tell your father you want her to wait on you. And that's exactly what he does. And then when everybody's out of the room, he takes her and rapes her. And Tamar is screaming out. It's in the Bible just like this. She's saying, brother, why do you do this to me? Stop. And it becomes such a family issue. Absalom's, can I say it in here? He's pissed. And Absalom says, all right then, I know what I'm going to do. And he said, Tamar, just lay low here for a little bit. We're just going to lay low. And after a certain amount of time, he kills Amnon. I know it says that David was mad. He says he was furious. But what did he do? What did he do? Why did it take Absalom to kill Amnon? If I would have been David, that guy would have been locked up and I would have popped him. If you know what I'm saying. You don't touch my daughter. You know what I'm saying? Where was David? So you got neglect here. You got rape here. You got murder here. Y'all should, if you haven't read that passage, y'all should start reading some of this stuff. Because another form of abuse in Noah, or not Noah, I'm sorry, not Noah, it's back in Abraham's time, his nephew Lot goes and settles in Gomorrah, Sodom and Gomorrah. We know the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, do you remember this? 2 angels come to tell him, hey, it's going to rain down fire in here. And he says, okay, you guys come stay in my house. And all these men are pounding on the door, telling Lot, put those 2 men out. They're angels, okay? They don't know they look like men. Saying, put those men out so we can rape them all night. Lot didn't know what to do. He says, here, take my daughters. It's appalling. And the angels blind them. And they say, you get yourself and your family out of here because God is raining down hell, so to speak. He's destroying the city. Yeah, it's in the Bible. Joseph, I'll tell you another phase of Joseph. So Joseph, he gets taken all the way to Egypt, and he's actually getting promoted. Potiphar, one of the leaders of the land, and again, it's one of my favorite stories of all time. I love this story. It makes me cry. Forgiveness. And Joseph's serving with all his heart, and he's promoted, and he's promoted so much. Potiphar says, you have access to everything, just not my wife. And Potiphar says he didn't have to worry about anything except for feeding himself. And one day, Potiphar's wife says, lay with me. Because Joseph's handsome. Says he's well built in one translation. Since we're talking about love and sex hijack, I'm just going to say it. He's sexy. Sexy, and he knows. No, I'm sorry. Anyways, got to lighten it up somehow. He says no. And he keeps saying no. And she's badgering him and badgering him and badgering. It's unwanted sexual advances. It's sexual abuse. To the point where he says no, leaves his coat, and she screams, falsely accuses him, throws him in prison. False accusation diminishes real abuse for every single other person. But the real abuse should be able to be free to come forward. False accusation creates an environment in which those that are abused will always feel like no one will believe me. And there's emotional abuse. Here's some very hard questions you can ask yourself to see if you're in emotional abuse. You constantly second guess yourself around this person. You ask yourself, am I too sensitive multiple times a day? You often feel confused and crazy. You're always apologizing to your partner. You can't understand why, with so many good things in your life, you aren't happier. You frequently make excuses for your partner's behavior to friends and families. You find yourself withholding information from friends and family so you don't have to explain or make excuses. You know something's terribly wrong, but you never quite can express it, even to yourself. You start lying to avoid the put-downs and reality twists. You have trouble making simple decisions. You have the sense that you used to be a very different person, more confident, fun-loving, and relaxed. You feel hopeless and joyless. You feel as though you can't do anything right, and you wonder if you're a good enough partner. And last, there's spousal abuse. Everyone in here that's been married, is married, wants to be married, or wants to know more about being married, hopefully I got you all covered, should read the book. His Needs, Her Needs by Willard Hartley, and Love Busters by Willard Hartley. Just to let you know, I haven't been totally sitting on my laurels while I'm not preaching every Sunday. I've read books like Healing Choices, The Path to Healing, or The Healing Path, Unwanted Sexual Behavior. Fantastic book. You all need to read it. It's a wonderful book. I've read a lot of books this summer. I probably read about a dozen books. changes that heal, Goliath must fall, emotionally healthy spirituality. What I'm about to share comes from Love Busters. And he talks about 6 things that in a marriage relationship will destroy love in a relationship. 3 of them are non-abusive: dishonesty, except for we just found that could be manipulative, but in a general sense, independent behavior and annoying habits. And then there's 3 outright abusive ones: selfish demands, disrespectful judgments, and outbursts of anger. I'm not talking about you hit your thumb and all of a sudden somebody blew up, okay? I'm not saying that in the heat of an argument, somebody got angry. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this habitual pattern that every single time you bring something up, what are you talking about? You know what I'm saying? It's those outbursts, those constant outbursts of anger, those disrespectful judgments that say, something's wrong with you for thinking that way all the time. It's that selfish demand. Now I need more. And you need to do this for me without any reciprocation. It's abusive. And I'm going to say something here. It happens as much to husbands as from husbands. Are you hearing me this morning? In my research and in my studies, you never hear about husband abuse. You want to know why you never hear about husband abuse? One, we're typically bigger in frame and in physical power. Typically, please don't shout me down, and we're a lot bigger in ego. Okay, can you accept that one? Typically speaking. And if I went around and said, hey, my wife's abusing me, what are you going to... Oh, yeah. Oh, great. Yeah, you're a guy. It doesn't happen. And yet the abuse happens all the time. Physically as well, but typically emotionally, verbally, mentally. And it happens on both sides. And typically what happens with a guy, he goes off and has an affair, and then he's all the more blamed, and he says, I'm checking out of here. That's what typically happens. Not to justify his affair, because everyone is responsible for their own response. One sin does not necessitate another. But listen to me, folks. Abuse will steal your love. Abuse will steal who you are. Abuse will steal your hope. It'll make you ambivalent. It'll deaden you from the inside out if it's not dealt with properly. You think, no one's going to understand this. How can I even talk about this? In today's society, and it really wasn't that bad. It was just this. And we go through all these rationalizations, and we get to a spot in life where we go, how come I feel dead? What's wrong with me? And when I talk about hope, because you lose hope, I'm not talking about, oh, I wish that would happen. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about that kind of hope. I'm talking about the hope that sucks your heart rate in and your desires in to where you have this expectation where you go, I know this is going to happen, and I got my faith in this. I can trust this, and it's not just this trivial wish thing. Because what hope does, what real hope does, it draws your heart right into where it's like, oh, I have a passion for this. And abuse, it'll steal that. It'll suck it right dry. If it's abuse in a marriage, you'll be like, I've lost hope. I don't know if it'll ever change. I'm going to play one more video real quick. Apologize for going late. I knew I was going to go late. I'm out of practice. I appreciate that, but I'm out of practice.
Yeah, good you are.
Ready? Cool. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, well, first of all, let me say thank you for having me in today. And I want you to know that you have the full cooperation of my organization, SNAP.
How many members are in your organization, Phil?
We had 11 at our last chapter meeting. 10. Karen just moved.
You had a woman in your group?
Of course it was a woman. They don't discriminate, not when it comes to abuse. And this has nothing to do with being gay. What this is priests using the collar to rape kids. Kids, boys and girls. was 11, and I was prayed upon by Father David Hawley in Worcester. And I don't mean prayed for, I mean prayed upon. Are any of you Catholic?
I was raised Catholic. Now I go to my wife's Presbyterian church.
I'm lapsed. I go to church with my grandmother sometimes.
It's safe to say we were all raised Catholic, but now, not so much.
Okay, well, let me tell you. When you're a poor kid from a poor family, religion counts for a lot. And when a priest pays attention to you, it's a big deal. He asks you to collect the hymnals or take out the trash, you feel special. It's like God asking for help. So maybe it's a little weird when he tells you a dirty joke, but now you got a secret together. So you go along. Then he shows you a porno mag. And you go along. And you go along. And you go along until one day he asks you to jerk him off or give him a blowjob. And so you go along with that too, because you feel trapped, because he has groomed you. How do you say no to God, right? You see, it is important to understand that this is not just physical abuse, it's spiritual abuse too. And when a priest does this to you, he robs you of your faith. So you reach for the bottle or the needle, or if those don't work, you jump off a bridge. That's why we call ourselves survivors. So am I the first survivor?
I'm going to close with this. The end of Joseph's life. Actually, when Jacob died, all of Joseph's brothers got worried. And they came to Joseph. And they said, we'll be your servant, we'll be your slave, whatever you want. Joseph cried. He said this. He said, what you intended for evil, God intended for good. The path to healing is one openness. That's why I wanted this clip. He's sharing his story. The story has to be revisited. You have to feel it to heal it. You have to go down that path. Because you can't forgive unless you do. And then forgive. Forgiveness does not mean it didn't matter. Forgiveness doesn't mean letting somebody off the hook. Forgiveness lets you off the hook. It says, I don't have to live with it anymore. I set them free, and I leave them to God. And I say, God, what do you want to do with me? How do you want to use it in my life? Amen? And last, get help. We all need help. Pastor Rick will be the first to admit, does he see a counselor? Yup, the same one I do, okay? Why? Because we all have had pains. We've all had issues. We've all been through things. Help is okay. Get help. Somebody say amen this morning. Jesus loves you. Jesus doesn't want you to be shamed. He doesn't want you to be shamed in your addiction if you have one. Whether it's porn, whether it's alcohol, whether it's sex, it doesn't matter. Satan wants you to be shamed. God doesn't want you to be shamed. He wants you to be able to tell your story so you can go there and understand the reason for your story and why you have the issue that you have so that he can bring healing and restoration. That's what God is in the business of doing. And this here, the church, your brothers and sisters, your pastors, are a safe place. And if you experience any different, you let me know. You know what I mean? Because our desire is to rectify it and make sure that this place always is a safe place representing the love of Christ. Amen? Let's pray. With our heads bowed and our eyes closed, nobody looking around. If you're sitting here this morning, you say, Pastor Dan, I don't know Jesus Christ. I don't know him. I don't know for certain if I were to die tonight, I would spend eternity in heaven. You see, Christ is the only answer to abuse. Christ, he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of peace was upon him. Jesus was abused. He knows, he understands. And all his desire is to stand there with open arms saying, I want to love you, and I want to receive you into my kingdom. I want to heal you. And if that's you this morning, you say, Pastor Dan, I want to know Jesus. Just raise your hand. Is there anybody here? Anyone at all? Well, Father, I lift us all up